gentleman yields back. The gentlewoman from California, Ms. Kim, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to really thank the witnesses. You are the experts in this field, and I think it's such a timely hearing on the topic of how we discuss the economic challenges posed by CCP. As you know, it's no secret that CCP, under the authoritarian regime of Xi Jinping, they are trying to displace United States as the #1 economy in the world and counter the American dream with the CCP's version of the China dream on the global stage. I mean, I am an immigrant who came here to live that American dream, and to see that eroding every year by CCP, I can't tolerate that, which is why, when we see CCP strategically undermining U.S. interests and threatening U.S. economic and commercial interests abroad at every turn, we got to do everything we can to come up with policies that will counter it. We just saw in the last week, CCP is not just satisfied with threatening U.S. economic and commercial interests abroad. It has also sought to violate our domestic airspace and the longstanding international norms with surveillance balloons, right? So clearly, we need to put CCP and Xi Jinping and their reckless actions tamed. So let me ask you, with Mr. Lorber, question for you. The CCP has opted to increase its bilateral swap line agreements to further internationalize its currency and rival the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. So as in the case of Russia, these bilateral swap lines are being used to circumvent the US dollars and sanctions. So can you talk about the policies that US can implement to flatten or reduce bilateral swap line agreements between CCP and other countries?
Thanks. Yeah, it's a great question, and I think there are two responses to it. The first response is, in any situation, including like this, where there is a national security threat or potential illicit activity occurring, that is a prime candidate for the use of a targeted sanction. So that definitely does exist in this scenario. I think the second point, though, is that part of the reason that it's been challenging, as I understand it, for China to internationalize many of its financial relationships and have widespread adoption of currency, is the renminbi itself has certain core limitations to it, right? So a degree of exchange rate volatility, capital controls that exist. And so I think the second point I would make is that there is always a distinct possibility, and maybe even a probability, that the expansion of these swap lines may not occur because of the limitations of the renminbi.
Thank you. Mr. Williams, I have a question for you. You know, the COVID-19 pandemic and the CCP's COVID-0 policy showed that critical supply chains and international commerce cannot be subject to the whims of an authoritarian regime that disregard the basic economic norms. So can you describe any policy recommendations that will help us move the critical supply chains away from China? And as a follow-up, your thoughts on re-engaging Indo-Pacific partners, and allies with our trade agreements.
So I completely agree with your premise, and I do think that that is a lesson from the pandemic. I think that we do need to figure out, can we reduce supply chain reliance on China? Now, I think one unfortunate circumstance has been that this administration has not been pushing for the right policies to do that. And one of the things that I would like to see much more of that I think can be more effective is trade agreements. And to put it simply, if we want our companies to leave China, we need to provide them with positive incentives in other markets to go to. So we need to make it easier to link our supply chains with these other countries. And so I would like to see more trade agreements, in particular in the Indo-Pacific. Taiwan would be a top candidate for me. And then I would also look at renegotiating the TPP, trying to fix it and make it work for U.S. interests.
Great, thank you. I mean, we agree on that. I have one more question for you, Mr. Williams. I've been an advocate for the United States to provide Taiwan, the membership in the international organizations, and I've done that in the first term that I served, and just recently I introduced H.R. 540, it's the Taiwan Non-Discrimination Act, to allow Taiwan to be included in the international monetary policy. So I want to get your take on that, and can you describe how getting Taiwan into IMF, for example, could strengthen the IMF and other international organizations? I know we.
So I have 5 seconds, but I will strongly endorse your bill. And I do think Taiwan's already a member of many
The
organizations.
gentlelady's time has expired. Please submit for the record.
I heard what I needed to hear. Thank you so much for your endorsement of my bill. I yield back.